Rev up your engines!
Well, GM keeps saying they got to cut down $2 billion in costs. They're laying people off. They're laying contract workers off. They're laying all kinds of people off. Well, they keep saying, GM, oh, we're great. We're going to be the electric car company of the future. Blah, 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 right? But they're laying people off. If you want to make better products, what's the last thing you should do? Lay people off. You're going to have an angry workforce. It's going to do even crappier work. If you go back in England, as an example, in the 70s, the British were always going on strike. They hated the working in the factories, blah, blah, blah. Now the English hardly make any cars at all, right? You get rid of the workers, there goes your industry. It's going to go down too, right? Maybe they don't care. Maybe they think like Elon. Elon Musk was going to make his Teslas with robots, 100% robots. But it didn't work out too good, so he had to start hiring people and making them intense in the parking lot because his robot factory, I guess he watched too many Terminator movies. He thought, well, the robots will make the robots. Well, it didn't work out all that well. And in this case, if GM keeps laying people off to cut their costs, well, eventually they'll have really crappy products, even worse than the stuff that they make now. But of course, that's how corporations are. They're generally dead from the neck up, and they're just looking at ways to make it look good so the stock price goes up. Well, that's not that great of a model to follow. You look at the Japanese. It took them decades to build great cars, and they just keep improving a little at a time, where the American car quality's been going downhill for quite some time. All they're thinking about is the next quarterly profit for the stock. They're not looking at the long run. The only thing they're pretending they're looking at the long run now is electric cars, and that's a fantasy that's fueled by the government. Oh yeah, we're going to drive electric cars. It's going to save the planet. One, it ain't going to save the planet because there's all kinds of pollution that comes off with them. It's just substitute one kind of pollution for another kind of pollution, right? And then the trillions that would be spent building an infrastructure and all this, they pretend, oh, don't worry, we'll solve that problem too, magically, right? Pull a rabbit out of my hat, right? The idea that keep firing people to save money is not a good thing for a company to follow down the line. And of course, now it's hilarious because a lot of the firing, they say, well, we got to get rid of these people because we're ramping up our EV production, right? And so we got to get rid of these people. They could use them to do the EV ones, right? But no, they want to just think they can just get rid of all the expensive workers and hire cheaper workers and they'll get better quality. For example, that GM battery plant in Ohio, they were paying people peanut money for working there, even though they got billions of U.S. taxpayer dollars to help build these stupid electric car factories and electric battery factories. Then they're paying the workers hardly anything. Talk about collusion between the politicians and the corporations. It's kind of hilarious. And now I notice the last time I looked, they talked about, oh, well, we're going to have this government subsidized battery thing in Flint, Michigan, right? And they said no mention was made of how much money they're getting in tax incentives. They won't even tell us anymore because people are realizing, look, all our taxpayer dollars going. Now they just slide under the rug. Don't look under the rug. Don't look how much money we're giving these corporations. Ash Faltum says, Scotty, do you think there will be Chinese car brands in the U.S. in the future? Well, there already are. These Buick SUVs are made in China. They're selling them over here. Don't think they're headed over here. If you mean the actual Chinese car companies, I'm sure at some point they were, like Geely. It's a huge corporation, right? They'll probably eventually be selling them in the United States, especially if electrification starts going whole hog because, average American electric cars like $60,000. The Chinese make electric cars that are like $5,000. And when people want cheaper ones, they're going to go for price and they'll end up buying Chinese ones that they can make cheap and send them over here. They'll probably have tariffs on them and all kinds of stuff too, but it's only a matter of time when that stuff is going to happen. GM's already selling made in China cars in the United States, and Ford's got some that they're bringing over, some Lincoln. So, it's already started, and I'm sure eventually the Chinese car companies will come on board, or they'll get a deal where they'll rebadge them. Like when I was a kid, I had an Opel. Well, it was Buick sold them, rebadged them, but because GM used to own Opel, but they were still made in Germany, and then they would just bring them in under the GM brand. I'm sure that'll happen. Tony Atkins says, how reliable is the 2014 Mazda 6 manual tranny? Very reliable. It's the automatics that were the weak points. The new ones seem to be a lot better, but with the standard transmission, those things can last a long time. All the customers I have over the age that had Mazdas, the engines are usually pretty good. The standard transmissions were fine, but the automatic transmissions were the reason they got rid of the cars. So if you're looking at a manual, yeah, they're excellent. Danny Sherwood said, Scotty, I got a Chevy Silverado 2015. Two of the lifters went bad, number 6 and 8, at only 75,000 miles. I changed the oil every 3,000 miles. What would make them go bad? They don't build them right. I've been telling people for ages. GM does not make cars like they used to. Now, if it would have been a 2001 Silverado, hey, those things are pretty well bulletproof, right? But as time went on, GM got cheaper and cheaper. You want to pray that it was just bad manufacturing of those lifters, because you had 2 of them go bad, right? Pray it's not the camshaft. The lifters are pushed by the camshaft. If the camshaft's wear, the lifters will go out. And then when you replace them, within a year or less, those lifters will go out. So if you find out those lifters go out again, not only did you have lifter problem, but your cam's worn too. And they have had cam problems with those engines. So pray it was just those bad lifters and not the cams wearing out too. Wesley Richards says, our Japanese import's a good idea. We're looking at a Toyota Auris as a second car with 100,000 kilometers for $7,000 US. In New Zealand, 60% of the cars are registered as Japanese imports. Parts aren't a problem. Okay, if parts aren't a problem, you're in New Zealand. It's a lot closer to Japan than we are in the United States, right? Go right ahead. The problem I tell people in the United States is if they buy a Japanese import car, it's hard to get parts for them, and a lot of guys won't work on them because of that. And they get some beautiful cars from Japan because they don't drive them much. I've seen 20-year-old Japanese cars that had like 15, 16,000 miles on them because they don't drive that much in a lot of Japanese places, right? But you can't get the parts for them in the United States. If you have parts problems, not at all for Japanese imports in New Zealand, go ahead. Adamine Ashion says, Matrix 2012 versus Scion XD. Which do you suggest for rugged and sturdy? I go for the Matrix. They seem to be a little bit longer. They're both excellent vehicles. And you're talking about newer ones. It was the older ones that had problems with oil burning, but the new ones don't. Now, if you were looking at older ones, as long as it's the 1.8 liter engine that's in them, none of them burn oil. They were excellent engines. It was the bigger engine that they had problem with, but not and the newer ones like that. You can kind of take a pick, whatever one you really like. You're talking about used, so there's a limited market, and if you find a really nice looking Scion and the Matrixes are kind of ragged out, or vice versa, I'd go for the one that looked the best and held up the best and had the least amount of mileage on it. Fishout says, my 2015 Altima doesn't start quickly in very cold weather. Battery's new. Okay, if it doesn't start quickly, does it sound the same? Does the engine, you turn the key and it just run, or does it run? If it goes slow, you need a new starter now. You got a new battery. Maybe your starter's going out. But if it spins at the regular speed, but doesn't start, generally it means your fuel injection system is not spraying the extra gas needed. When a car's ice cold, the fuel injectors have to spray extra gas to make the engine start up. It needs extra fuel. So you might try cleaning the fuel injectors. My friend Bernie in Albuquerque has that ATS fuel cleaner. It's phenomenal. You just put it in a gas tank, drive it a couple hundred miles. If you've got carbon built up in your injectors, it'll clean it, it'll stop doing it. It'd be the cheapest fix on earth. Now, if that didn't help, but it eventually started, most people would live with it because they're not going to go out and buy new fuel injectors as long as it eventually starts, and then when it's warm, it starts out okay. But it's worthwhile trying a cleaner. Simple to do. Razor V says, should I buy a brand new Ford Bronco Sport or a brand new Nissan Sentra SR? I wouldn't buy either of them. Let me tell you, if I had a car and it ran okay, I certainly wouldn't get rid of it and buy either one of those. Realize, the Bronco Sport, those are the ones all made in Mexico. Well, the quality is, I would not buy one, right? I wouldn't buy a Nissan either. Their quality's garbage. I would not buy either of those vehicles. Now, if you forced me to buy one of those vehicles, I truthfully don't know which one I would buy. Now, if it was a Ford Bronco made in Michigan, the other ones, not the Sport, but the ones made in Michigan, I would buy that. But I wouldn't buy a Nissan Sentra, and I wouldn't buy a Ford Bronco Sport because they're all made in Mexico. They only make them there because it's cheaper to make them. And I would not buy the Nissans. Their quality is garbage. So, Shokira Mifune says, should I get an all-wheel drive Camry or a front-wheel drive Camry? Both have 8-speed transmissions. Well, it depends what you want. Most people really do not need all-wheel drive. My mother drove for years in a front-wheel drive Toyota in Buffalo. Snows all the time. Had no problems getting stuck anywhere, right? You don't really need all-wheel drive in most situations. Now, let's say you live out in the country, you got a muddy dirt road. Yeah, it would come in real handy there, right? But how many people live like that? Most people are driving on dry pavement all the time. Regular paved roads. They don't go off-road that You're paying extra money for something that's going to get slightly worse gas mileage. It's going to cost more money to maintain. Why buy something you don't necessarily need? Of course, the sales guys have been pushing it. There's more profit. They're more expensive vehicles. And they'll, look, it's great. Oh, look. You don't need it in most situations. But if you have a situation where you do, crappy roads, you're going all over the place, mud, dirt, ice, snow. Yeah, the all-wheel drive one will be better. But realize, not only does it cost more, whenever you get a flat tire, you have an all-wheel drive, you got to buy all 4 tires because they all have to be the same. There's a lot more expense involved in an all-wheel drive vehicle. I personally wouldn't buy one because I don't think I need one. So if you never want to miss another one of my new car repair videos, remember to ring that bell.